Where carp go in summer. As the sun climbs higher and the days stretch longer, most anglers find themselves scanning the surface, chasing the occasional show of a rolling carp or the telltale bubbles of feeding fish. But what if I told you that the real story of summer carp location isn't written on the surface at all? Beneath the shimmering water, a complex world of temperature layers, oxygen dynamics and shifting food sources dictates where carp will be at any given moment. Summer isn't just about warmth, it's about balance. Carp are constantly weighing their need for comfort against their need to feed, all while navigating a lake that changes by the hour. The key to finding them lies in understanding how they use these invisible layers to their advantage. Today we're diving deep into the science of summer carp movement, revealing why they scatter into patterns that often baffle anglers, and how you can use this knowledge to put more fish on the bank. Imagine standing on the bank, watching the water ripple under a summer breeze. It looks peaceful, almost random, but beneath that surface, carp are making calculated decisions. They're not just drifting, they're strategically positioning themselves in zones where temperature, oxygen and food align perfectly. In the morning they might be patrolling the shallows, soaking up the sun's warmth and feeding on the insects and small creatures that thrive there. By midday, as the surface heats up, they slip into cooler, deeper layers, following the thermocline where the water is just right. And it's not just about temperature. Oxygen plays a massive role too. Windy banks, inflows and healthy weed beds become oxygen hotspots, drawing carp like magnets. Even food isn't random. It blooms in cycles, shifting with the sun and the wind, and carp adjust their routes to intercept it. This episode isn't just about where carp go in summer. It's about why they go there and how you can use that knowledge to turn blank sessions into red letter days. Thermal stratification. The summer blueprint. In summer, a lake isn't just a body of water, it's a stack of invisible layers, each with its own temperature, oxygen level and appeal to carp. At the top you've got the warm surface layer, heated by the sun and full of life. But just a few feet down, the temperature can drop dramatically at what's called the thermocline. Below that, the water stays cooler and more stable, offering carp a refuge from the summer heat. Carp are masters at navigating these layers. They're not just looking for warmth, they're looking for the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. Early in the morning they might be up in the shallows, basking in the warmth and feeding on the insects and small fish that thrive there. But as the day heats up, they'll often drop down, following that thermocline to deeper, cooler water where they can conserve energy. It's a daily commute, dictated by the sun and the lake's unique structure. What's fascinating is how predictable this movement can be. Shallow bays heat up quickly, becoming too warm for carp by midday, so they move out. Wind-exposed margins might fluctuate in temperature, but they also stir up oxygen, making them prime spots for carp to linger. Deep basins, on the other hand, offer stable, cooler pockets where carp can retreat when the surface becomes too intense. But here's the thing, carp don't just react to these layers. They use them to their advantage. They'll often patrol the thermocline, that sweet spot where warm meets cool, because it's where food and comfort intersect. Understanding this stratification isn't just academic, it's the key to unlocking where carp will be at any time of day. And once you start seeing the lake in layers, you'll never look at summer fishing the same way again. Oxygen dynamics. Where summer carp thrive. If temperature is the first rule of summer carp location, oxygen is very close second. Warm water holds less oxygen than cold water, which might seem like a problem for carp, but summer lakes are full of oxygen sources. You just need to know where to look. Wind is one of the biggest players here. When a breeze ruffles the surface, it doesn't just create ripples, it aerates the water, pumping oxygen into areas that might otherwise become stagnant. Then there are the natural oxygen factories, weed beds. Healthy weeds produce oxygen during the day, turning them into magnets for carp. Inflows from streams or rivers bring fresh, oxygenated water into the lake, creating hotspots that carp will patrol relentlessly. Even the humble lily pad can play a role, shading the water beneath it and creating a microclimate where oxygen levels stay just right. Carp are incredibly sensitive to oxygen levels, and they'll move long distances to find the sweet spots. A stagnant bay with no wind or weed growth can become a dead zone by afternoon, pushing carp toward the dam or a windy point where the water is alive with oxygen. Even a slight breeze can make all the difference. So how do you find these oxygen-rich zones? Look for the signs: rippling water where the wind hits the bank, birds diving for insects, a sure sign of life beneath the surface, and bubbles rising at dawn or dusk. These are all clues that oxygen is present, and where there's oxygen, there are carp. The anglers who consistently catch in summer aren't just lucky, they're reading the lake like a book, and oxygen is one of the most important chapters. Feeding highways, where summer food abounds. Summer is the season of plenty for carp. Food is everywhere, if you know where to look. Bloodworms hatch in the warm silt of shallow bays, zooplankton blooms in the open water, and insects fall from overhanging trees, creating a buffet that carp can't resist. But here's the catch: this food isn't spread evenly across the lake. It's concentrated in hotspots that shift with the sun, the wind, and the time of day. In the early morning, as the sun begins to warm the shallows, carp will often move into these areas to feed on the insects and small creatures that thrive there. By midday, as the surface heats up, they might drop into slightly deeper water, following the food that's been stirred up by the wind or drawn into cooler zones. And as evening approaches, they'll often return to the margins, intercepting the insects that fall from the trees and the natural debris that collects there. What's incredible is how precise these feeding zones can be. A slight change in depth, a pocket of warmer silt, or a sheltered corner holding natural debris can become a carp cafe, drawing fish in for hours at a time. And it's not just about location, it's about timing. The carp's feeding rhythm is tied to the sun. Morning warmth triggers hatches in shallow bays. Afternoon shade keeps mid-lake bars active. Dusk brings them back to the margins where falling insects and cooling water create the perfect feeding conditions. Key to summer success is to think like a carp. Follow the food and you'll follow the fish. That might mean moving with the sun, targeting windy banks where food is being pushed into the water, or focusing on weed beds where insects and small fish gather. Summer carp aren't hard to find, they're just following the buffet, and once you learn to read the menu, you'll always know where to cast. How to locate carp without tech, reading the summer lake. You don't need expensive sonar or underwater cameras to find summer carp. All you need is a keen eye, a little patience, and the ability to read the clues the lake is giving you. Summer carp reveal themselves in subtle ways, if you know what to look for. Bubbles rising at dawn, birds diving into the water, wind ruffling specific areas. These aren't just random events, they're signs that carp are nearby, feeding and moving. Start by walking the bank at different times of the day. Note where the water ripples, where the reeds sway with the wind, and where the surface dimples with the telltale signs of feeding fish. Carp aren't random in their movements, they follow patterns dictated by the lake's conditions. And once you start to recognise those patterns, you'll be able to predict where the carp will be before you even arrive at the water. Summer location is all about interpretation. A quiet corner might seem unpromising, but if it's sheltered from the wind and holds a pocket of cooler water, it could be a carp hotspot. A weed bed that's thriving in the heat isn't just a tangle of plants, it's a food factory, drawing in carp from all around. Even the direction of the wind can tell you where to cast. A breeze hitting a bank isn't just moving water, it's aerating it, creating oxygen-rich zones that carp can't resist. The best anglers don't just fish the lake, they read it. They watch for the subtle signs, the way the light hits the water, the patches of bubbles that betray feeding fish, the birds that know where the food is before we do. Summer carp aren't hiding, they're following the lake's rhythm, and once you learn to listen to that rhythm, you'll never be far from the fish. The summer commute. How carp move with the day. If there's one thing you can count on in summer, it's that carp are always on the move. They don't stay put, they follow the sun, the wind and the food, adjusting their locations as the day progresses. In the early morning you'll often find them in the shallows, soaking up the warmth and feeding on the insects and small fish that thrive there. But as the sun climbs higher and the surface heats up, they'll slip into deeper water, following the thermocline to cooler, more comfortable zones. By midday, they might be patrolling the deeper margins or holding in the cooler layers of open water. And as the evening approaches, they'll often return to the shallows, intercepting the insects that fall from the trees and the natural debris that collects there. It's a daily commute, a rhythm that repeats itself with remarkable consistency. What's even more fascinating is how carp use the lake's contours to make this commute as efficient as possible. Old channels, silt runs and weed bed edges become underwater roads, guiding carp along predictable paths. They're not swimming aimlessly, they're gliding, conserving energy while maximising their feeding opportunities. And once you understand these routes, you can intercept them at every stage of their journey. Imagine standing on the bank, watching the sun rise over the lake. The carp are in the shallows, feeding eagerly. By the time you've had your breakfast, they've moved deeper, following the thermocline. And as the sun begins to set, they're back in the margins, ready to feed again. It's a pattern that repeats itself day after day, and once you learn to recognise it, you'll always know where to find the fish. Summer carp aren't hard to locate. You just need to think like they do. Why summer carp vanish and where they really go. There's nothing more frustrating than arriving at the lake, setting up in a spot that was productive yesterday, and finding that the carp have seemingly vanished. But here's the truth, they haven't disappeared, they've just relocated. Summer carp are constantly on the move, adjusting their position based on temperature, oxygen and food availability. A heat wave might send them deep, a storm front could push them shallow. A weed bed die-off might force them to seek out the next oxygen refuge. Blank sessions often happen because anglers are fishing where the carp were, not where they are. Summer carp don't spread out randomly, they condense into zones where the conditions are perfect. Sometimes those zones are no bigger than a few square metres. To the untrained eye, the lake might look empty, but to those who understand the layers, the pockets and the routes, the carp are right where they're supposed to be. The key to summer success is to stop chasing the carp and start chasing the conditions. Track the wind, the sun and the oxygen. Watch how the lake changes throughout the day and adjust your approach accordingly. Carp aren't hiding, they're following the lake's rules, and once you learn those rules, you'll always know where to find them. Think of it like this. The lake is a living, breathing ecosystem, and a carp are perfectly adapted to thrive within it. They don't fight the conditions, they use them. And if you want to catch them consistently, you need to do the same. Summer carp fishing isn't about luck, it's about understanding the science, reading the signs, and putting yourself in the right place at the right time. And now, you've got the map. Follow the science, find the carp. Summer carp aren't hiding, they're following the lake's rhythm. And now that you understand the science behind their movements, you'll never look at a summer lake the same way again. Temperature layers, oxygen dynamics, feeding highways, these aren't just abstract concepts. They're the keys to unlocking where carp will be at any given moment. And once you start seeing the lake through this lens, every session becomes an opportunity. It's not about casting blindly and hoping for the best. It's about reading the water, interpreting the signs, and putting yourself in the right place at the right time. The anglers who succeed in summer aren't just lucky, they're observant. They understand the layers, track the oxygen, find the food, and follow the routes. And now, you have the knowledge to do the same. So, the next time you stand on the bank, watching the sun glint off the water, remember, the lake isn't just a body of water, it's a dynamic, ever-changing ecosystem, and carp are the masters of navigating it. They're not random, they're predictable, and once you learn the rules they follow, you'll always know where to find them. Summer carp fishing isn't a mystery. It's a puzzle, and you now have all the pieces. So get out there, read the lake, and turn those blank sessions into memories. The carp are waiting, and now you know exactly where to look.